Gentlemen, how you doing?
What's going on, Nick?
The results are in. I have this envelope. The people have voted. Let's see what they said. So, oh boy. Each of us has received precisely 0 votes to be elected to be the hosts of this podcast today. So, I guess we'll all have to share the load and host it together.
Yeah.
So, guys, it's here. We have some clarity. Yeah, we know what's next.
Sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Every 4 years, there's this pent up. I'm not going to make decisions, and all of a sudden,
yes, yeah. Exactly.
It is so insane. I know with us being, in Oklahoma and a lot of oil and gas, and as you guys know, like I've had a history with Hill long before I bought it, and on the business side, and it's just that every 4 years it is just a roller coaster. That election year drops off, 40% while they're just waiting, and it never really matters who wins because they're still drilling for oil.
Yeah.
It
still need to drive cars. Yep. Still need to.
I was always kind of wondering what the most volatile sector is in terms of, the election results and having an impact and how much does it really change. And at the top of my list, just ignorant list, I don't really know any better, but energy, oil and gas would be like kind of near the top. Firearms and defense and stuff would be up there in my mind. But what are your thoughts?
I think both of those are huge. Statistically, I don't know any real study, but those are always two highly political discussion points, right? So you hear pundits and candidates talking about those two issues a lot, maybe more so than other things in our industry. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Paul, you have so many different types of customers in probably every possible sector. Do you notice like some feel more or less affected by whatever the outcome might be of an election? Or
I think there's just a general indecision that leads for months leading up to it, no matter if you're in medical device or aerospace or defense or whatever. Most of our customers are in regulated industries more than not, so I think they get affected by it at all levels. And but I've heard anecdotes that industries that are completely unrelated have the exact same thing. Just everyone's holding their breath until the election's over.
Yeah, so it's over.
So believe it or not, we haven't been sponsored by any political party to really sway our conversation today. So we're just going to talk about how it impacts manufacturing, regardless of our personal views on politics or the candidates or anything like that. But I did pick out some good manufacturing news, so maybe we should dive into that.
The global manufacturing industry is full of twists and turns. But what does it mean for you? The Making Chips hosts have hand-selected the latest news, and they're about to give you their perspective. No hot takes, no political garbage. Just commentary from the perspective of a manufacturing leader. This is MWMN, Metalworking Manufacturing News.
So this article from Manufacturing Dive is industry leaders react to Trump presidential win. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll just pull out some highlights. The one who probably gets cited the most on Making Chips out of all these folks is like Jay Timmons, who's the president of the National Association of Manufacturers, NAM. And just some highlights. So, he starts off by saying that they've worked with Trump before, when he was the president the last time. And he says, now it's time to get to work to address the policies that will define your administration, Mr. Trump. We are facing monumental headwinds today, and sector optimism is at its lowest levels in years. The cost of business continues to increase. So, that's something we can all resonate with. What did he say here? We believe that we can build on the successes of our previous work together, roll back burdensome regulations, unleash American energy security, power the economy for the future of all of the above, energy strategy, and restore the dignity of manufacturing work. So something we would all love to see.
I can definitely agree on restoring the dignity of manufacturing.
Yeah, for sure.
Here in our country.
Without even all the detail of what he said, what I liked is just, now let's get to work, right? We're just talking about everybody's, it's an election year, got to get through the election. Well, regardless of what the outcome would have been, we got to get to work, right?
Absolutely.
Just that alone, I absolutely agree with.
So we'll get a voice a female voice here from Women in Manufacturing Association president and founder Allison Grealis. Basically, the highlights she said is they look forward to working collaboratively with the administration to foster growth, innovation, and a robust, skilled workforce. As we look to the future, WIM is committed to advancing opportunities for women and supporting a vibrant manufacturing industry that creates meaningful careers and drives economic strength. Heck yeah. I mean,
Oh, yeah. Everyone
let's
can
do
get
that.
behind that idea.
Yeah.
And we definitely need to increase the number of women coming into manufacturing because it's still so unbalanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, some of the best people on my team are women. I love it. Like
Absolutely.
they just bring a different angle to whatever challenge we're trying to solve. And yeah, I'd love more of that.
It's documented and proven that, especially big businesses with women on boards or in senior executive positions perform better than those that don't.
Mhm.
So it's just,
Oh, sure.
that's
Diversity.
absolutely-
Hey,
That's
what is diversity, Ron? Oh, I believe it's an old wooden ship. I don't think we're worried about the lack of an old wooden ship. Okay. Anchorman reference.
Yes.
This one has like some elements of concern, I would say, from the National Retail Federation president and CEO Matthew Shea. He said that, hey, effective trade policies will increase America's competitive advantage in research, development, and innovation, and will protect strategically critical infrastructure, which will increase the standard of living and quality of life for all Americans. However, the adoption of across-the-board tariffs on consumer goods and other non-strategic imports amounts to a tax on American families. It will drive inflation and price increases, and it will result in job losses. So the retail industry stands ready to work with President Trump and Congress to enact tax and trade regulatory policies that make America more competitive, increase domestic investment, and create jobs. So are we going to see more inflation? Are we going to see more price increases? Are we going to see job losses? Remains to be seen, but the guy brings up some points that need to be considered.
It's a careful balance,
Mhm.
right? Promoting more domestic manufacturing, which is typically more expensive than offshore, but yet it creates jobs and not a simple slam dunk decision on any side.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, right? I mean, it may create some job losses in some areas. It's going to create job wins in others. It's going to reduce costs in some areas. It's going to increase costs in others. Again, kind of true regardless of what the results of the election would have been this week. You just got to get to work.
Yeah.
Now we at least have some direction of what the rules are going to be for the next 4 years. And then, over the next several months, we'll learn a lot more about the rules that we have to operate in, but we got to be ready to go.
I don't know why I'm thinking about work holding right now, probably because I'm a machining guy. But, what I love about fixturing is you can come up with 5 different fixture designs for the same part and they could all work. And it's kind of like politics. Everyone's pulling different levers to try to solve problems. Maybe it's tariffs, maybe it's subsidizing certain things, maybe whatever it is, on either side of the aisle. And it's like, I genuinely believe people are trying to help manufacturing. I mean, both sides claim to be champions, right? Which side was like, hey, we don't like manufacturing. We hope that shrinks.
Right.
No,
Nobody's
right?
saying that.
They're just pulling different levers to create the growth and to improve the result. The last one in this article is just kind of like a perfect segue into how we're going to do this today, is from the Association of Equipment Manufacturers president, Megan Tannell. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but AEM's focus continues to be on policy, not politics.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, stop there. That's a really good way to be.
Absolutely.
We look forward to working with the Trump-Vance administration and leaders on both sides of the aisle to advance pro-manufacturing tax policies, strengthen rural America, ease regulatory burdens, negotiate new trade agreements, and solve the immigration crisis. Together, we can advance a policy agenda that helps equipment manufacturers create jobs, invest in communities, and build equipment that makes life better for everyone. So, yeah.
All things we can get behind.
Yep.
Yeah,
Can't
exactly.
argue with any of those.
So as we like talk about, kind of our feelings on this, and none of us are political science geniuses or, economics majors or anything.
Not even close.
But I think one thing we can all agree on is that when it comes to the election, perception might mean more than reality in a lot of ways. So I just got done with the MT forecast, and the AMT puts on this forecasting event, and they showed like, hey, here's kind of what happens, whether it goes blue or whether it goes red, and it's really not that much of a change. The conclusion was like, it doesn't really make as big of an impact as everybody builds it up to. And, I wouldn't know to agree with that or debate it or not. But when you look at the graphs over time, over 30 years, it's kind of like, I don't see any like massive peaks or valleys here because of who got elected. So.
Yeah, we had at the most recent NTMA Engage conference, there was similar. There was some economists talking and some political folks talking, and they kind of said the same thing. Some policies will change here and there. Maybe around OSHA, maybe around other little things, but by and large, once that uncertainty is gone, things just kind of open up every single 4 years.
That's the point. Uncertainty is what's bad for business.
Sure.
Right?
Part of it, I think, also just speaks to the resiliency of really America in general, but I think certainly this industry. Like, again, give me my rules I'm playing by, and I'll play, right? And I'm gonna play to win. Yes, the rules can change and this, that, and the other, but as long as no one's trying to shut down an industry, which they're not. I mean, there may be regulations, or we're inventive people, we're resilient. We, especially, I think a lot of our listeners as business owners, business leaders, right? We're always looking for what that next thing is, and you can throw some new rules at me, that's fine, and we'll adjust to those and still work to be a profitable company. And lots of times those are the things that create big innovation too, right?
Yeah, you bet.
You solve a problem.
Pulling from art school, but creativity thrives within constraints. So, if you look at cubism, like they use certain shapes, like they have to depict the image with certain techniques, and then, that's really creative how they did that. So it's like, okay, we have new constraints or changing constraints, or like you said, rules that the game's rules might adjust. And so now you got to adjust with it. Nobody understands the new NFL kickoff rule, but somebody's got to.
I'm never going to adjust to that. I don't get it. I don't see the point in
it. But yeah, you got all these special teams coordinators who are like, all right, what do we do now? Everything's different. Devin Hester's like laughing his way to the bank because nobody's going to break that record.
Right.
But one thing that I think we should celebrate, regardless of how you feel about the outcome, is just our process, as a constitutional federal republic, and voting and campaigning on things that you believe in, whether, from either side. And our manager, Jen, posted something that I thought was awesome. And she grew up in a small town, and she remembers trick-or-treating, and her dad was running for mayor of the small town. And so like they'd go up, trick or treat, by the way, like this is my dad, you should vote for him, here's what he stands for. And so they were like campaigning for their father, and she sent a screenshot on LinkedIn, and he won by like 58 votes. And it's got to be the 58 houses that they visited that made the difference.
Absolutely.
Right?
Totally.
So I thought that's pretty cool.
That was a great story.
So Paul, regulation.
Yeah. We've thrown that word out many times in the last few minutes. We have lots of customers in the defense space, and as anyone that's in that space or even adjacent to it knows, there's been a lot more regulation coming down in the last few years in the form of the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification. And I've heard people question whether or not that would change or go away. And in fact, some of you, I think, even have said, oh, I don't need to worry about that. If Trump gets elected, they're just going to get rid of all that stuff and
Right.
get rid of regulation. And while I agree that it's well known that, that Republicans kind of lean in the less regulation direction, I don't think anyone is at this point thinking that CMMC or more of those security regulations are going away. And in fact, there's going to be a bigger investment in the defense industry. That industry is already absolutely booming. It's going to boom even more, but we have to keep our data safe. So just for, I think, anyone listening, if you were thinking that you were going to get off by delaying until this election, I don't think that's a good strategy. You got to dig in, you got to lean into that. And we got to keep the intellectual property of our country and our defense industry safe. And that relies on every manufacturer that's involved to do their part.
100%. Yeah, totally agree. And it's kind of funny when we're talking about, maybe the Republican side, they'll just do away with regulation. The main guy, like kind of pushing for Trump's side was Elon. And if you talk about AI and should that be regulated and should we put some guardrails on that, he says that we should be more concerned about that than nuclear war.
Yeah.
So it's like probably in general, Republicans are less for regulation, I would say, right? I mean, you tell me.
Sure.
I think that, the general
many
sense
types.
is for sure. I mean, we need some of that regulation too, right? I mean, but I think, and maybe, depending on what they've talked about, maybe Elon's role might be in this new administration. He might have a great impact on regulation, not so much in doing away with them. I know just personally, like, I mean, from a federal regulation standpoint, I don't feel those on a daily basis. I know my customers do. But if you just even bring it down to like a state, local level, like if you're trying to get a building permit or you're trying, any of those regulatory types things that you might deal with. So often it's not the regulation itself, it's the enactment of it, right? Or the management of the regulation, the testing measures, or the lack thereof, right? I mean, like we probably all know stories of people that haven't been able to open their new business or haven't been able to do, haven't passed some, maybe environmental regulate, something. And it's not because they haven't done the work, it's because they haven't had an inspector. So they're getting postponed days, weeks, months in being a productive business because we don't effectively manage the regulations we have. So, and I know there's been a lot of talk about maybe getting Elon in to make stuff happen. I don't know, I think that's maybe the broadest term you could call it. But we've also all seen how innovative he is in his private life as far as
his own company.
Oh, yeah. So he clearly knows how to lead and get stuff done. If he is going to play some sort of role in that would be encouraging to me, right? Not so much in getting rid of regulations, but maybe in getting them enacted,
streamlined.
Yeah,
streamline. Yeah, that's a good way.
Working.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to build a home in Wisconsin, like all of our family's building this little lake house, and we can't like break ground on it because they have to do this test to make sure there's no like Native American burial area or something like that, which is cool. Like I wouldn't want someone to build a property over my grandparents' grave, but like it just takes them forever to go out and check the thing, so it's really delaying us. Right. And I think that's your point. Like you got to let's move it on. Let's streamline.
Yeah, it's not the regulation. It's just the getting the regulation completed.
Yeah, let's talk trade policy. I'm serving this up to you because I don't really know any of this stuff the way I should. Well, you guys are veterans more than I am.
Yeah, I'm certainly not a global economic trade expert by any means, but I think what we see with our OEM customers, most of our top customers are global organizations. Working with them 7 years now directly under 2 administrations, I guess you could say now. It would be 2 administrations now, and then my history prior to that. I mean, they definitely have to play a balance. I think they spent years investing overseas in their own shops and in other shops. And some of that has actually worked out really well for us too, because maybe we're a secondary on some parts that, they have to keep us qualified to make those parts, even though maybe they're bringing the bulk of those parts in from overseas. It'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with some of the trade policy stuff. Going to depend a lot on the tariffs, I suppose. I mean, how broadly that is applied or not applied. How much of that's talk versus action, we'll see.
Yeah, that's on the talk of tariffs. That's a tricky one. My dad was actually studied as an economist. He had a PhD, taught.
Well, we
economics.
Should have your dad on the show.
I didn't get.
What are we doing talking about this?
Golly,
Mr. Van Metre, where's he at? Can we call him in? I'm like, let's talk about trade. Okay, you guys.
I unfortunately didn't get any of his smarts in that area, but it's a tricky one, right? Because during Trump's last administration, when he put all the tariffs on metal, that was hugely impactful in a negative way in a lot of machine shops, a lot of companies in our industry. Being heavy in aerospace, and it wasn't just tariffs alone. It was also like the war in Ukraine, but a lot of titanium in the world and even stainless is made in Russia, right? And all of a sudden, shops can't get that stuff, or what they can get is now 4 or 5 times the price. they might be stuck in the middle contractually between their customer and the price that they've agreed to sell a part for,
Sure.
and what they have to now buy all this raw material, But at the same time, we do want, long term, we want those metals to be made here in North America. We don't want to be relying, especially on Russia,
Right.
to make critical materials that are going into the defense industry and aerospace and all the other industries we serve. So I can see the need to have policy that pushes manufacturing back to North America. Everyone, I think, is in agreement. The policies from many administrations decades ago, let's work on the knowledge economy and have manufacturing done other places that are cheaper, was not actually a great solution in the macro sense. And if that hadn't happened and we had a stronger manufacturing base for the last 4 or 5 decades, we'd be in a much better spot. But yeah, I certainly don't have all the answers of how to do that well enough that we build up our national capabilities while not negatively impacting, companies in the short term with tariffs. So it's a tough one.
Yeah, the tariff.
We should get someone that's actually smart to join us on a future episode.
Had we known your dad was in
Yeah, way to tell us during the episode, Paul. What the hell?
He's long retired, and he probably doesn't want to talk about it.
He would love it.
Yeah, I mean,
you just didn't want to embarrass yourself in front of your dad. You're like, I didn't teach you anything, Paul. You don't know how to answer this.
Right. I mean, tariffs have been around for as long as I've known, right? I mean, it's nothing new.
Sure.
I think applied correctly, they're a very beneficial tool to the United States. I mean, every country uses them, right? It's not like this is something new that we're going to do. I mean, there's reasons that some of our products aren't sold in other countries, right? Because we get tariffed really hard by other countries for our cars and, a lot of things. A lot of what I heard and read, and again, it's not all inclusive because I couldn't stomach most of the news on a day-to-day basis the last 6 months. But, I mean, some of the stuff I read, like on tariffs, it's, I don't think, and I hope that we're not going to see like this broad, like, okay, we're going to put tariffs of X% on everything out of this country. Out of Mexico, out of Russia, out of China, wherever, it doesn't matter. But applying it, strategically where it can bring some of that here, or it will keep some of that production here. Like, I really don't have a problem with, right? I mean, if there's a, and I don't know what tariff is on a U.S. car in Sweden or whatever, but I don't mind tariffing their cars as much as they're tariffing ours.
Yeah, these are like retaliatory policies, right? So if you do something, they're going to retaliate.
Yeah.
Like, how does that? Because I have a story about that, actually. It deeply affected our business.
Yeah, you deal on a global basis.
Yeah, so, my grandfather invented the first circular carbide production saw. So think like a big, huge circular saw with carbide teeth. And we still make them today. And we make monsters. So, if you go to Fab Tech and you go to the saw section, nobody there makes the size saws we make. And what that means is we might sell 2 or 3 a year because they're for like steel mills or rail yards or wherever.
Yeah.
Well, I was in China about 9 years ago in Chengdu at a plant that makes these huge like ring gears that go in the center of like the wind turbine.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And so really cool process, but it was an 800 millimeter billet. And this saw would saw through it. And they were going to replace like 23 band saws with 4 of our saws. And each of these saws was like close to $2 million.
Wow.
So it was really exciting, really cool to see. Just a great experience. Ate a lot of hot pot, had a lot of stomach problems, but it was great. And then what happened is it was in the first Trump administration. So what happened was like the tariffs kicked in and like we were 25% higher because of it. And so there was like no way we could compete with the other competitors were from Austria.
Oh,
got it. So they won the business.
Yeah.
Your family didn't.
Yeah. And so it's like, all right, well, if you're trying to think like what's best for the country, it's a toss up. That would have been a cool game changer for us to make those machines. Would have helped one company here, but then it would have made a Chinese factory way more productive and efficient too. So it's like,
right.
How do you know? I just know we lost the business, and that's probably the number one reason why. So, yeah, these things aren't black and white, really, and it's just hard to figure out what pulling the lever really does. For a guy like me who isn't Paul's dad, it's really hard to know kind of the ripple effects of all this stuff. But That's just an interesting story that was kind of in my real life, and tariffs really
that's a real
impacted
world
us.
example.
I don't know. The impression I'm getting is, it's not going to be, there's not going to be these blanket applications of tariffs. As the pundits are pointing out around the tariffs, I mean, that does come back to increased costs to U.S. citizens, right?
Mhm.
If you're buying that product. If you're buying something made in China and the tariff on a Chinese product is high, then yes, so you're going to pay more for that item. Does that help balance the playing field to something made in the USA? I mean, that's the goal, right?
Yeah, it's a long-term hope.
We bid against, China parts. We bid against parts in India. We bid against parts made in Mexico regularly, all the time. The gap's not that huge in a lot of cases. I mean, it can be, but lots of times it's not. And if that levels that playing field a little bit, and now I get to make my fair share of those parts, I mean, I'm certainly not going to be upset about that. But if it's just this blanket application of it, that could be bad all around, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the importer pays the tariff.
Right.
Everybody thinks like you put the tariffs on them, they have to pay this
Yeah.
extra bit. Like the importer pays the tariff.
Right.
So it's that's something one of the economists at MT Forecast said. Hey, I just want to make sure everyone remembers that the importer
Right.
pays the tariff. Everybody thinks it's the other way around. All right. Well, taxes. Let's talk about taxes. How might that change?
Oh, my favorite topic.
Yeah, they will change. I spent several years at a CPA firm, and usually around election years, a lot of the CPAs be like, I don't really care who wins and what their tax policy is. Just the one thing that's constant is they will change it, and people will pay us to figure out a way to save them taxes. Right?
Yeah.
So
right.
I mean, they're going to change. Who knows? I mean, the talk is they'll go down, but again, it might be offset by tariffs, right? I mean, there should be a lower tax rate, I would assume, coming out of the new administration, probably at the corporate level, at the capital gains level, state, local. That's going to be independent on those locations, but lower taxes generally does boost the economy in a good way. As long as we don't underfund our government, though. I mean, that's the risk. But if I don't remember where I heard Trump talking sometime the last couple of weeks, it might even been on like the Joe Rogan podcast or something. The calculations they had done, the tariffs would offset the reduction in taxes for the government's revenue. I saw something today that I think it was a pretty far out there estimate that, it'd be like maybe a $20,000 effect on the typical positive effect on the typical American family. I don't think we're going to see anything like that. And that's huge. That would be pretty massive. I think that was probably something that scrolled across my feed that was junk, but there will be change. And, but again, kind of back to everything we're talking about. I mean, everybody will just have to adjust to that change. I mean, there'll be positives and negatives to the changes. There'll be new rules to play by, and you adjust to those rules. I doubt we'll see any like reduction in, so like some of the accelerated depreciation stuff that happens. I mean, that's not going anywhere now, which is good. I think our industry especially really leverages that highly on a lot of their equipment purchases.
So you don't think that particular policy will change at all? They're not talking about
that. It's not going to get worse.
Yeah.
Could it get better? Yeah,
because I know we talk about bonus depreciation all the time, and it is a factor in like if we're going to buy.
Oh, sure. Tools. I mean, it has to be, right? I would assume we'll probably see like some investment tax credits, which again would be great. The more capital investment we can make, the better, right? I mean, that's Paul. I know you guys talk a lot about like the R&D tax credits.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been some changes that haven't been as good.
Yeah, I could see that kind of circling back around a little bit.
Yep, absolutely.
That's
huge for manufacturers.
That's
a lot of what they do is R&D work. Most people, that's one of the reasons we sort of lean so heavily on it and talk about it is, most job shops and people, small shops out there don't realize that a lot of what they do every day is R&D. And if they can collect the information for those costs, there's huge tax benefits to it. I mean,
yeah,
we've had customers realize, $100,000 plus tax benefits just in actually looking at their time tracking records for, R&D jobs and set up making fixtures and doing
that counts.
first part buy off. It does. Yeah.
And so, Trump talked for like 10 awkward minutes about the rockets. It was very funny when in his acceptance speech where he's like, oh, it just comes down the fire everywhere. Huge rockets, huge, and then it gets a nice hug like a baby, So I was just like, where are you going with this? But yeah, like you don't have to make parts like that for it to be R&D.
Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes we think absolutely. Like, oh, this isn't a rocket engine or this isn't some breakthrough technology. So maybe I don't have an R&D department. How could I get an R&D tax credit?
Right.
But like, Paul, maybe you could speak just a bit about like kind of what qualifies as R&D at a high level for a tax credit.
We've done webinars on this. I should know exactly, but there has to be a level of uncertainty in the outcome. That's one of the big things, especially in, a job shop. It's like we have this new part number. We have to program it. We have to make a fixture. We have to choose tooling. We have to troubleshoot the tooling, get all the feeds and speeds dialed in. All of that includes uncertainty. Largely that stuff qualifies. So obviously slightly off topic, but since you asked, if those policies do get more favorable, just a shout out for people, to record, good time tracking out on the shop floor, record, the expenses of what you're putting into those processes, talk to your, tax professionals, of course, for the detail, but yeah, historically, most setups of new part numbers, much of that is R&D.
Yeah, and there's plenty of like local resources throughout the country that can help you make a case for qualifying for that.
Oh,
so
sure.
However it changes, there's opportunity right now, and it might change. There might be more. Who knows?
I would venture to say on the taxes, I mean, you'll definitely see some changes to rates, but I would imagine there'll be more incentive and credit type tax changes if I had to guess. I mean, if you just look historically, that's where a lot of it comes. So I know I'd seen some talk of, even some of the opportunity zone investments and so forth where, so if you're going to go make some capital investments into, there's maps that you can look at, right? So they're usually economically depressed areas and so forth, or maybe a return of some of the historical tax credits where you can, take some old historic buildings and stuff and renovate them. Those types of things. Now on the flip side of that, it sounds like we'll probably do away with maybe the EV tax credit will go away. So, and some of the incentives around electric vehicles, that again, that's going to offset something, right? So there's going to be advantages on one end and maybe negatives on the other. So,
So the one last thing I wanted to, because I genuinely don't know how much this will make an impact, but as of right now, the House is still undecided, right? And so, or as of the time of us recording this, maybe not when it gets published, but if you have, the Senate, the House, and the presidency all one way, the speed at which change might happen with policy is faster, right?
Sure.
So do you think that'll make a major impact, comparatively to the past administration and then the first time Trump was president? Because it was split both times, right?
First time he was president, he had they had all three. They had the
House,
Senate, and the White House.
I thought he didn't have the House. I thought he didn't have
maybe
the
for
House.
the first 2 years.
So the first till midterms, till 2018.
Okay.
Yeah,
got it. So yeah, do you see change? Again, I don't really know, but do you see change much faster when it's all aligned one way, or
I think
how much does that really make a difference?
I have an opinion on that. If you want, Paul, you share yours.
Mine is just that Congress as a whole seems pretty broken for a long time now.
Yeah,
and everyone would hope it goes faster because again, that indecision, that just lack of moving forward, whatever the policies are, is just not good for anybody. So, but you probably have something more informed to say.
Well, not necessarily, other than I think the difference between last time and this time. Last time being 2016, this time being now, when potentially again House, Senate, and White House will all be GOP. In 2016, there was still a large portion of Congress that was, I think the informal term for them is never Trumpers. right? And so there was still a lot of pushback against the Trump administration in that first 2 years. Then there were the midterms, and I think the House flipped first, maybe the Senate, I can't remember. This time, I don't think there's as many people that are going to oppose Trump. I think the House and the Senate is filled more with supporters. So I would guess things will go faster. Which again can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? I mean,
what direction are you going faster in, right? So hopefully we're pulling the right levers.
Yeah,
remains to be seen.
I would imagine there'll be more of an emphasis on passing laws than executive orders this time. Because executive orders get undone as soon as the next administration comes in, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
You can eliminate those on day one, which we'll see on January 21st. We'll see a bunch of executive orders overturned and a bunch of executive orders enacted. Laws are harder to change. I bet there's more momentum behind that now, assuming the House falls to the right, which we don't know at this point. And I bet there'll be a lot more emphasis on laws that will be harder to change in the future.
Yeah. So interesting. Hey, look, we did our best. None of us really know what we're talking about that much.
Nope.
At least it's not obvious.
Yeah. Hey, we hung in there. I think we collectively wondered out loud what a lot of people are wondering right now.
Yeah.
How's it going to be? What might change? And our biggest mistake, and we can blame Paul, is we didn't bring his dad.
I'll throw me right under that bus.
But no, I mean, it's obviously top of mind for everyone, especially manufacturing business owners right now. How's this going to affect me? Should I pull the trigger on this new investment? Should I still wait? We have more certainty than we did a couple weeks ago, but there's still one thing that's always true, and that is there's certain things you can control. And I think you said a few times, Mike. You said a few times, Mike. We got to get to work.
Yeah.
And everybody's got to do the things that we talk about in every episode that, regardless of where you stand politically, are going to help you make more chips.
Right.
And
if you're not making chips,
you're not making money.
Bam.
Bam.
Bam.